I'm on the live stream link, and it's
Okay. It's still spinning. It's still spinning.
hmm.
I'm still getting at least on my end, it's
There
like
we go.
going
It
live.
looks like we're good.
Okay. Just in case, real quick, episode 123 of Trek Live. A little bit late because we're working with graphics, but we're excited to talk about some Star Trek Doctors. So, real quick, before I get to Bill, sorry. The green box thing that's up Discord has updated, and that's a feature that I don't know how to turn off yet. So I'm sorry if that bugs you guys, but
We're working on it.
yes. So Bill, we're talking about doctors today. What went into your list? I guess was it just
What went into my list?
strictly qualifications, or was it more as like on the character side? Was it?
I didn't put on like the in universe who would I want to be treated by quite as much. Like I didn't quite go that route.
Okay.
It was more like, favorite character as a whole.
Okay.
Like kind of like looking at their development, what they offer to the show. Whose episodes do I tend to like? Which I guess, yeah, I mean, you could go a couple different ways here, especially given like we're doing this partially. Like you said, we love doing these guess each other's. It's definitely kind of becoming one of our go-tos when it comes to. We really like it as a way to do like a top 5 list kind of thing, but do it in a kind of different way. So we've been doing this a good bit lately. But choosing the doctors, of course, is a natural thing to do. But given the current situation, doctors are on the mind.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, with that kind of perspective in mind, it would have been easy to kind of go to, if I had a medical problem, who would I want to be treated by? But to be completely transparent and honest, I didn't really think about that with my list. It was more a straightforward, who's my favorite character, who's best developed, whose episodes do I enjoy the most, who do I think brings the most to their show, kind of thing. It's more of a subjective, personal taste kind of a list. What about you? How did you approach your?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily go the route of who I would want to be treated by either, but I
It's
went,
like a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I went with characters. I think it's tough. It's not tough. It's Star Trek is the Doctor is a staple of Star Trek. All the majority of the Star Treks have a very prominent Doctor character in the kind of show structure, or however you want to put it. But so it's always there. But I went as far the route I went is characters. Which characters do I like? And then maybe a little bit of qualifications sprinkled in there as well. So
sure. Because I think like when you talk about like qualifications and like what kind of a doctor they are, I think because of the fact that, like you said, each show has like their own kind of prominent version of this kind of a character, it lends itself to a kind of comparative, like what makes this doctor unique to that doctor. So like the qualification element, the what kind of a doctor they are, I think does kind of, even subtly, even if you don't think about it through the lens of who would I want to be treated by in like a crisis, or if I had a problem, like even without thinking about it through that lens, I think our own personal taste and doing something like this, I think kind of brings some of that to the surface, maybe even accidentally, like which kind of a doctor do we misgravitate toward, I guess. I don't know.
Before we jump into the topic at hand, do you have any rewatch to report?
Not through the traditional project as much. I did rewatch a little bit of Picard over the course of the last week. Not like in huge bulk yet, but I went back and revisited some of that. But yeah, not a whole lot this week. There is something taking place. We have Rob in the chat today, and this is not rewatched yet, but he's hosting a Star Trek First Contact watch today, It's First Contact Day, so I'm hoping to maybe swing that and be able to say next week I rewatched First Contact.
Yeah.
Outside of the traditional chronological rewatch, but if anybody's watching this before Sunday at I think 9 o'clock UK time,
yeah, which is
in a few
2,
hours,
yeah,
1
or 2.
Definitely head over to Rob's Trekkie Rob Twitter account and get all the details on that. It sounds like a good time, and I'm hoping to be there myself, at least for a portion of it at the very least. So, yeah, that's my pitch for Rob on a cool idea and my kind of pseudo cop out with my rewatch and promise to rewatch something today. Maybe. What about you? Where are you with yours?
So I think I watched 2 episodes. The first was Empath, or The Empath.
Okay.
And then I always blank on this one.
Chris.
Yes. Which I kind of enjoyed, actually. I think they're middle of the road episodes, at least for me. But I really enjoyed the battle sequence. And then also just further reinforcing that Kirk is in love with the Enterprise more than any other.
Yes.
At least in season.
It supersedes everything.
Yeah, at least in season 3, it feels like the love interest of the week, a little bit. So I thought that was kind of fun to see as well. So.
Yeah, I love the Klingon stuff in that. I love the Klingon ship kind of like shadowing the ship, shadowing the Enterprise.
Yeah.
With that big booming score every time they cut to the Klingon ship, kind of hovering off into the distance. There's some really cool Klingon stuff there. The Empath is a controversial episode. Some people really hate that. Some people really like it. It's really, really dark. It's probably some of the darkest Star Trek ever, in my opinion, like thematically, and it gets to some pretty dark territory, and it's very divisive. So,
which I think it's perfect timing because it played into my picks a little bit after I watched that episode. I was like, man, which I'll get into.
It's a big McCoy episode.
Yeah, which I'll get into.
Sure.
Probably right now because why not?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Let me bring the bright graphics up and reveal my probably very wrong guesses for Bill, and I can talk through mine a little bit here. So let's go through. All right, so I'm going to go through my list first, and then I'm going to go through my guess for Bill. So my number 5 is Bashir. Why he's maybe so low is just because it's been a long time since I've seen Deep Space Nine, but I remember a little bit that he's like a very talented and knowledgeable doctor. I think his character, the genetically modified stuff gets into some different territory that was interesting to explore, but also I think as far as character, I really like him and O'Brien's kind of interactions, so that
Sure.
4, you Crusher. I like. I know that people often quote her as a missed opportunity, but I do think she's very, very talented, and I mean, she was the head of Starfleet Medical so she's obviously very knowledgeable in that regards. But I do like her as a character as well. Number 3, Phlox. I think this is the more colorful pick. Very knowledgeable, not just in, I don't know how to really put it, but Common Core medicine, maybe. This is, Phlox is a little bit more knowledgeable on the other end of the spectrum, which could be fun. Number 2, McCoy. I'd probably go TOS McCoy. Bigger sample size, obviously, but what else can I say about McCoy? Talented, obviously very knowledgeable, but just one of my favorite characters, probably of TOS. Had to be at number 2. Number 1, you guys know I'm a Voyager guy, the Doctor. I think, obviously, a walking encyclopedia, very knowledgeable. I think the character development of that character, especially, is probably one of the best ever done in Star Trek. So as far as characters go, I really like that, the Doctor. So that's my list. Just a quick overview. Maybe we further on in the show we can talk a little bit more in detail. My guess for Bill. Oh man, this was tough. Number 5, Crusher. Number 4, Bashir. Number 3, Phlox. Number 2, the Doctor from Voyager. And number 1, McCoy. So, that is my list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did pretty well with my guess for you.
Yeah.
I guess can I do that first? Can I?
Yeah. Let me just
guess for you and cover your list.
Yeah. Just give me. There we go. Ready when you are.
Okay. I did guess Bashir at number 5 for you.
Okay.
I was torn up until like late last night. I had Pulaski there. I wasn't sure you were going to do Bashir at all.
Okay, yeah.
Just because it's been such a long time.
She's probably my 6, just because we could talk about it in a bit.
Yeah. I was close. Because I know there are episodes of season 2. I know you're a big fan of Peak Performance, and she's really good in that one. With her relationship with Data. We've had conversations about Dr. Pulaski before. Rob's in here. He was our guest, I believe, on an episode about Dr. Pulaski.
Yeah.
So I was torn. I thought maybe Pulaski would make the cut. I was torn between her and Bashir. But we've watched... I know you haven't seen Deep Space Nine in a long time. We watched a couple episodes on Trek After Dark in the last little while. Just kind of slightly reintroduced. He hasn't been like centric in the episodes we've watched. But I thought maybe he would sneak on. His friendship with O'Brien, like you mentioned, I think is a big selling point with him. So I had him at 5 for you. I had Dr. Crusher at 4. I had Phlox at 3.
Oh wait.
I had
wait. Here we go. So Pulaski's 5.
No, I had Bashir 5. I was
Okay.
torn. I had Pulaski at 5 up
Okay.
until late last night. I changed it
Okay.
to Bashir. So Bashir 5, Crusher 4,
Okay.
Phlox 3.
Oh man, he's got it.
I got it. McCoy 2.
Yeah.
And Doctor 1. I got it right.
Yeah.
The two big things I was torn on. I felt good about Phlox at 3. I felt good about Crusher at 4. The 5 question with Bashir and Pulaski, I was kind of like maybe even Culber. I toyed with who was that 5th Doctor. I ended up going with Bashir, which was I guess a good move.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure exactly what you would do at 1 and 2. I knew they were going to be your top 2.
Yeah.
I feel like it could have gone either way, but sample size, like you said, I think the Doctor is such a big presence in Voyager for such a long time, the whole 7 seasons.
Yeah.
Such a distinctive, clear arc from beginning to end. And knowing how much you love Voyager as a whole, it's kind of your track, and he's such a central character to your track. I ended up figuring he would probably edge McCoy for that number 1 spot.
Man, Bill's got my number this morning. Just
this is an easier one than some of the. Yeah. I mean, this is more similar to some of the first versions of this we did when you do these like positional positions on the ship, captains, first officers.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with such a small list of possibilities. Right. It's a little easier to get really close. Some of the other ones we've done, like non-bridge sets and things like that get really challenging because you can go so deep and there's so many options and it's so kind of like a niche topic. But yeah, I feel good about I felt good about my guesses for you. But yeah, I feel like it's accurate and like representative of where you stand on these characters. And then should I give you mine now?
Yeah, I'm ready.
And then we'll kind of talk about everything as a whole, go through each character.
Yeah.
For my number 5, I had Bashir.
Okay.
My number 4 was Crusher.
Okay.
My number 3 is Phlox. My number 2 is the Doctor. And my number 1 is Dr. McCoy.
Okay.
So you're pretty darn close for me too. You flipped 4 and 5, which could have easily flipped.
Yeah.
On like Ask Me Next Week, I might have flipped them, especially if I was in the middle of a Deep Space Nine run, particularly like late Deep Space Nine, when I think he. I'll talk a little bit more about Bashir in a few minutes. I have some thoughts, but depending on like where I sat in Deep Space Nine at the time, I could see him nudging up a couple spots, maybe even to 3 for a period. But there are some interesting quirks to his character over the course of that show that I think make him kind of difficult to peg. It sort of depends on where you are in the series, and at least for me, for how strongly I feel about him. But yeah, we'll get into some of that. And there's actually some stuff with Bashir's character that I don't know if you would remember, because it's been such a long time, that I don't even know if I really want to talk about, because if you don't remember it, I don't want to spoil it, and I want you to like discover it and have your own feelings about it as you go. So I'm kind of torn with some things to talk about with Dr. Bashir, but I'll try to do it as sensitively as possible.
Is it like the DAC stuff, or is it different?
No, it's different. It comes pretty late in the show. There's a kind of change in his character that happens a little later. Some more information about him gets revealed, and kind of fundamentally.
I think I mentioned it when I talked about the how he's genetically modified.
You're right. You did. That's basically. I
remember that.
There you go. Okay, so like, let's talk about Bashir, because he's kind of like he was kind of the tweener that I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
that's our 5. Yeah. He's the one that like I said, I wasn't sure where you would put him, and I kind of he's the most fluid for me. Like I said, like the thing with Bashir for me is early Bashir, like in the first season and a half, he's very raw, he's very green, he's kind of arrogant, he's difficult to get along with. O'Brien at first doesn't like him at all. A lot of the characters kind of have no patience for him. He's like Mr. Adventure. He wants to be out on the frontier, and he thinks he's bigger than he is. That can really rub people the wrong way early on. He's got some rough performances in the first season. One in particular, there's an episode in the early first season where he's possessed. It's one of those like an alien kind of takes him over. Yeah. And he's got a scene while he's controlled that's really bad. It's not fair to judge the character on that, because it's not even really Bashir.
Yeah.
But there are little twerks to him early in Deep Space Nine that would knock him down a few pegs. As his relationship with O'Brien evolves, and it really leans into the friendship, the bromance in quotes, kind of dynamic between those two, having fun on the holodeck, drinking at the bar, talking about O'Brien's marriage and Bashir's romance at the time,
single
things
life.
like single life kind of things. Yeah, like they're really cool things that really define his character in that period of the show. And then once they introduce the genetically modified thing, I think that can be like a hot and cold thing. It's such a drastic shift in the character, where it retroactively maybe explains some things in his backstory that are kind of interesting if you're like into the show and you think about it. There are some quirks to his background, and some of his personality traits might make a little bit more sense with that kind of context. But some things about it are a little difficult to square. The actor had a tough time with it. He wasn't a big fan of that twist. He didn't like being like having the rug pulled out from under his portrayal of the character without kind of knowing that backstory while he was playing him for the first 5 seasons. So I kind of get that. I understand his frustration there. So like, that's what I mean. Like in that middle part of the show, from like late season 2 on to when he gets genetically modified, when you discover he's been genetically modified, that period is like my peak for Bashir. I think that's when he works best. That's if I'm in the middle of like season 4 or 5, Deep Space Nine, I'd be tempted to like maybe even lift Bashir up to maybe even the 3 spot. But he depending on where I am, it might pull me in any given direction. So I ended up putting him 5th.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember how you felt about
I just kind of felt it was kind of a little bit out of nowhere, and I think that also I kind of agree a little bit, because I think it takes away from. I don't think it adds to the backstory. I think it takes away a little bit from the backstory. So I'm not a big fan of that probably either, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Like I think there was a way to do. I think maybe the mistake, or who might have called it a mistake. The thing I wish would have been done a little differently in my personal taste is having him genetically modified to like resolve some like learning disability kinds of issues, which is what it was. He was struggling as a kid. He had social anxieties. He struggled with academics. So they had him genetically enhanced, but there's a way to maybe tell that story and have some of those things corrected, and have that still be a controversial thing and a hot topic, without making him have these like complete like it's enhanced like almost Superman-ish kind of qualities with being able to play darts, and if he's using that, he can kind of his hand-eye coordination so good that he'll hit a dime every single time. That I don't know that they had to take it that far, and I think that kind of undermines the character a little bit. That this whole time he's had the ability to do these, statistical calculations that Data could do or Spock could do,
right?
And just hasn't shared that information, and he kind of has to cover it up. Like to me, I think that makes that strains the credibility a little bit too much, and I think some of that could have been pulled back, and they could have achieved some of the things they wanted to achieve by introducing this idea that genetic enhancements are illegal. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a controversial thing, and the parents kind of did it on the black market and went behind, the legal system to correct the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting story to tell, and I think there's a good opportunity there without necessarily undermining the actor and his feelings on how he portrayed the character and the way that he had things in his head.
Yeah.
I think there's a different way to go about it.
Yeah. And I don't think it. I don't know. I don't think it really needed to be done, because I buy the golden boy, hot-headed, young green doctor.
Yeah.
But again, I guess that's why they were going for. That's the reason why he's like that. So
that's
I don't know.
I think that's the argument in favor of it for some, that it almost it adds to maybe you can retroactively make it make sense that he is that arrogant, and he's that's how like his smarts kind of come to the surface through that kind of arrogant coldness that he has in the early part of the show. But I prefer that to the genetic enhancements. Like I have less of a problem with the way he's portrayed early on as a green, arrogant, kind of young officer who thinks that he's kind of untouchable. I think like looking at the where we are today, there's all this talk about kids going on spring break and thinking they're untouchable, and thinking they're not going to be touched by things, and Bashir kind of echoes some of that. Like he thinks he's protected by his youth and his smarts and his there's just an arrogance to it that is common among people, that everyday people deal with. So I appreciate that. There are struggles with that. I think there are challenges to presenting a character like that manifest themselves early in Deep Space Nine, but I prefer that to what they did later on to kind of add color to the character.
Yeah.
But do you agree that the best asset to him is his friendship with O'Brien? Like
yes, I agree with that. Yes. When I think of even my limited memory of his character, that's what kind of one of the first couple of things that come to mind for that character. So.
Yeah, I think we're talking a lot about Bashir, which is kind of cool. It's not what I expected, but I think his relationship with O'Brien is unlike. I think it's the most real.
Everyday friendship, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Like getting off work, going to the bar, playing darts, talking about life. Yeah. Like the show leans so heavily into that, and there's so little of that. Like friendship is such a common theme in Star Trek, and there's a ton of it. There's a ton of friendship kinds of dynamics over the course of all these shows that are done really well. but the O'Brien Bashir one is so grounded and it's so recognizably modern, like recognizably today, that people that I think that really sets it apart, and I think that's not only one of my favorite things about that character. My favorite thing about that specific character. It's one of my favorite things about Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that you get from Deep Space Nine that you don't necessarily get from other things. Rob mentions his involvement with Section 31. That also comes later. That's in Section 31, which is now kind of a bigger thing that's kind of manifested itself into Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Discovery and
the novels too. I think that novels. It's way bigger than.
But that was birthed through Dr. Bashir and Deep Space Nine. Yeah. That's where Section 31 became a thing. Yeah. And Rob's right. His involvement with Section 31 is a big thing late in his time, and some of that ties into his genetic enhancements too. That's what makes it intriguing to Section 31. Yeah. Bashir is definitely going to be an interesting conversation to have as you kind of get into Deep Space Nine. He's an interesting character to kind of chart the changes, and he's one of the things that you can kind of see Deep Space Nine kind of changing through his character. You see it kind of maturing and getting, the series shifts and he shifts with it. Yeah. So we'll have a lot to talk about with Bashir as we get as you get going with your watch of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely be doing that. Number 4 for both of us was Dr. Crusher.
I just realized that we have the same list.
We pretty much do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we? Exactly. Except for 1 and 2. Our 1 and 2 are flipped.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which is really it's interesting. It's interesting. So like you were saying with Dr. Crusher, her, clear chief medical officer of the flagship. She spent some time as the head of Starfleet medicine. That speaks a lot to her qualifications and her administrative talents that she would be selected for something like that. I think one of my favorite, we've talked a good bit about it, her relationship with Picard, her kind of interesting backstory with him, and the will they won't they kind of thing is something I like about TNG. It's a hot and cold thing for people. Some people find it to be I think you said what's the phrase you used, lost potential. I think there's some potential there that was kind of left on the table with Chip. They explored it not a whole lot, but it's definitely there in the DNA of the show.
I love the setup. I love the best friend's girl kind of dynamic between her and Picard. I love that it people often forget it's there. Before TOS or before I watched TOS, I watched TNG. The dynamic is there. They have breakfast together. They have things, and she's not just a doctor. None of these characters are just doctors, right? They're more than that. So that's why Crusher's 4, I think.
That's why Crusher's 4, I think Crusher's dynamic with Picard clearly, when he has his most intimate, personal kinds of things to work through, things that deal with his history and his deeper feelings, I think he does tend to turn to Crusher about a lot of things. I think, but I think because of, like you said, the relationship he had with Jack Crusher makes it weird. It makes it tough. It makes it difficult. There are lines you can't cross, and he doesn't want to cross out of respect. But there are definite feelings there too. So there's a really rich dynamic there that isn't fully explored. I can't argue that it was. There is missed potential there. But I like the color that adds to the show. I like the way that makes me think about Picard and Crusher. It gives independent things to each of those characters that make those characters more interesting. It gives their relationship more texture and substance collectively. I also like the fact that she's a single mom. That's a different. She's a single parent. That's something we get a little bit of in Star Trek with Captain Sisko as well. But seeing a single mother raising a teenager in the early seasons, and the struggles that come along with that. It's not always well written, especially in the first season. But I think in the third season, in the fourth season, later on, even when Wesley kind of pops back up here and there, that certainly is a unique aspect to Crusher's character that is singular to her. It's something that she can claim is like, this is, if you're looking for this in Star Trek, you're going to go to her. That's where you're going to get those flavors are going to come from Dr. Crusher. So I think that distinctiveness is an asset to her. But it's hard to walk away from the missed potential. Like, she doesn't get a ton of episodes. When she gets episodes, sometimes they're really good. I love Remember Me. Where I love her line about, maybe it's not me, maybe there's nothing wrong with me, maybe there's something wrong with the universe. I say that all the time when I'm having a bad day.
Yeah.
I think that to myself all the time. Maybe it's not me, maybe it's the universe that's effed up. She kills it when she gets opportunities very often. She's got bad episodes like Sub Rosa, but every character has
everyone has
some I think you could look at all these characters on this list and so that is a swing and a miss. But she's got good ones too. So Phlox, we both have at 3. I think you said a lot as far as like his unconventionalness. He approaches medicine very differently than these other characters do. Much more.
But Billingsley just knocks that out of the park. I think
the performance of the actor.
The performance it comes through. I think from day one, he's one of the few characters that really just is on point, and that's a tribute to John Billingsley as an actor, but also the character. I think we could kind of talk about it a little bit, but I think the premise of the show starts to kind of play into these characters a little bit as we go through 3-2-1. I think just Phlox fits really perfectly in Enterprise. I could maybe see him in Voyager, but I think he does fit really well there.
He's a good. I feel like among the crew you have T'Pol, who's this like cold, logical, more advanced. She like from a scientific standpoint, from a technical standpoint, she's the most knowledgeable person on the ship. She's a couple steps ahead of the crew in terms of experience and just general knowledge of what it's like in space and what to expect out of different situations you're going to run into. But she has her own way of kind of articulating that, and it's problematic. Like, it takes her a long time to kind of integrate into the crew. Phlox is equally advanced. Like, he has that deep knowledge and experience, but he's much different from T'Pol. He's kind of the foil to T'Pol. He has a way of relating to the crew. He has struggles with relating to the crew too. He's a very different kind of person. He comes from a completely different background. He's used to different things. He's got 3 wives who have 3 husbands who like he comes from a very different thing that is not common to the crew, but he doesn't have that cold exterior that makes him difficult to talk to. And there's not that level of distrust like the crew tends to have for T'Pol early on when they're learning and they're green because of the tense relationship with the Vulcans. Phlox can offer information and advice and context for things without the level of skepticism that's often met by T'Pol. Met to T'Pol when T'Pol offers those kinds of things. So I like that kind of yin and yang that you get from those 2 characters on that show, particularly early on in the first season. But like you said, Phlox, while he's so like, especially compared to the other doctors, he's clearly like the most primitive. He uses leeches and eels and all these like crazy things, like very earthy kind of medicine kind of stuff. But he's, of all these characters, he's the most ahead of his crew. Like he's the most advanced of comparatively to the other crew. I think in kind of every way. He's more weathered, more seasoned, more knowledgeable, more experienced. He's less surprised by things. He takes things in stride in a way that, because of the concept of the show, like you said, it's kind of integral to the concept of the show. The crew of the Enterprise NX-01 is inherently not good at like rolling with the punches. Everything's a huge deal because it's time for everything. Where Phlox doesn't necessarily see things that way. So yeah, I think he's clearly outside of the triumvirate of Enterprise. He's not one of the main 3, which has like we did a couple weeks ago, the cast structures and the series structure. Enterprise is more mirroring to the original series with like a big 3 that really kind of drives the show forward, and then you have these sub characters that in varying degrees bring their own, you know, element to the show. Phlox is definitely in the upper half of those non-big three characters in Enterprise. But he's not as integral to the show as maybe our top two, and maybe that's why he's 3 and not 1 or 2.
Right.
But Rob says that Phlox is his favorite Enterprise character. You do see that a good bit, I think. If you told people who's your favorite Enterprise character, you will get some Phlox responses. You get a lot of Trip, you get a lot of Paul, but you'll see a good bit of Phlox. And I think he's a pretty commonly cited favorite.
He's such just a fun, colorful character. He's very knowledgeable as far as like practicing medicine and stuff like that. But it's also like even I just think of moments in the mess hall with DePaul and talking about diversity. I think it's he has such great character interactions with other characters on the ship, and such a colorful and fun character. That's why he's at 3 for me.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think he's a pretty safe 3 for me. I think I feel good about him being below these 2 that we're about to talk about, but on most days I feel pretty confident that he's maybe a slight cut above the 2 or 3 that are the 2 that are on this list below, and then the couple that are off the list. Yeah. He's on his own tier, I would say.
Yeah. Who do you want to talk about first? Because I feel like, at least for me, these next 2 picks for me could be, any given Sunday, any day of the week. These could be flip flopped, So,
let's. I mean, they have some similarities. They have some differences, and they could be. I agree with that. I could, depending on where I sit, on watching the shows and who's freshest in my mind. Let's go like McCoy. I'll talk about McCoy, and then we'll go to your number 1 with the Doctor.
Right.
McCoy, I think, is so integral to the show with what it becomes with Triumvirate. McCoy brings the emotional component. He brings like the raw humanity to the show that is the yin and yang to Spock's the yang to Spock's yang with the emotion or with the logic and the cold scientific approach. I think that show needs him to work. He did such an integral component of the original series is the humanity and the light touch, the humor of it, the Spock and McCoy banter. Yeah, go ahead.
He's such a balancing force, I think, in TOS.
Yeah, correct. I think that's what makes him rise to number 1 for me. I can say what I'm about to say. I could say about the 2, but I can't imagine the original series work without. The show doesn't happen without him. At least the show that we got. That we're not going to get a show with the qualities that made Star Trek special without what Dr. McCoy and DeForest Kelley brought to it. So that makes it difficult for me to knock him from number 1. The difference here is, I think, we just mentioned at the beginning of the show with the Empath, which you just watched. That's an episode that kind of had McCoy. There was one a few weeks ago with you in your rewatch for The World is Hollow and I Touch the Sky. That's another kind of McCoy heavy episode. There are a handful out there, but there aren't that many that really lean heavily into Dr. McCoy specifically. It's usually him. Yeah, he has great moments throughout the show, and in episodes that might not feature him heavily, or that he might just be one of the 3 involved in this mission or in this story. But the number of moments that he has in not only the episodes but in the movies as well. Where with my number 2 pick, your number 1 pick, Doctor, the MH, there are episodes that really dive into his character and build on his arc, which is the kind of difference. And depending on what you value and what which I think moments or episodes could maybe sway you with picking one over the other. I went with moments with McCoy. I think of things like, I always kind of talk about that scene in the turbo lift and Amok time. Spock's going through Pon farr, and he can bring his closest friends. Of course, he asks Kirk, and then he turns to McCoy and says, "I'd be honored if you would come as well." And McCoy says, "I would be honored, sir," or something along those lines. That deep respect that goes unspoken between McCoy and Spock, whenever that manifests, whenever that gets shown through moments like that, there's some of my favorite moments in TOS. I think of, in a movie I'm not a huge fan of, Star Trek V, scene with his dad. That's a huge moment. That's a huge scene in a movie that's a great scene. And it's a great piece of his backstory, and I think it says a lot about him as a person and what kind of I think people who have that kind of curmudgeon-y, tough exterior, kind of, rugged, but still very warm beneath the surface. And once you get to know him, he's like that. All the things you could that you could use to kind of, all the adjectives you could use to define Dr. McCoy as a character and try to sum him up, I think all makes sense given that backstory. Like, I think that kind of experience plays to people becoming the way the Dr. McCoy is. If that makes sense.
I'll talk about why he's number 2 for me. You mentioned the empath. It is a McCoy episode, but the thing that stands out to me in that episode is the loyalty that McCoy shows to his two friends. Right? People don't remember. It's literally Kirk is given the choice to send one of the two, Spock or McCoy, to their death. So, spoiler alert. He doesn't get that option to even choose, right? So McCoy will sedate Kirk, and then he'll sedate Spock, and then he goes. And that's just a loyalty that is unmatched, I think, in a lot of these characters. Not to say that none of these characters are loyalty, but I think McCoy is definitely on another level. And then I think also McCoy's his confidence and his calmness. I think you mentioned it. His in a previous episode, he's like given it this terminal illness. It's just cool as a cucumber, and that's something I look for in a doctor, right? We mentioned at the top of the show, who would you want to be treated by? So I think that's coming a little bit in this pick. I just think that, and then I also just love his, like, it's already been said, I love his banter between Kirk and Spock. I think it's just great. I think now I'm making a case that he should be number 1 just because I'm going through TOS, but that really those are kind of the reasons why he's number 2. I think just the loyalty to his friends. I really love that. That doesn't really go into the what makes a good doctor. It kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. It just makes a good character, right? We could argue that these are our top 5 characters, I guess. But yeah, that's why my McCoy is at number 2.
That's fair. That's fair. That's why it's at number 1 for me. But I think, as we're gonna find here in a second, it's the 1 and 2 for both of us. I think we could, not to speak for you too much, but I think they're pretty interchangeable depending on your mood and what you. Yeah, we could each be talked into the other way. I think. But let's dive into the EMH. From my perspective, I kind of alluded to it when I kind of quickly ran through his arc. There's clear beginning, middle, and an end for him. And he's a flawed character. He's got challenges. He's got holes in his character that he's aware of and that people around him are aware of, but people are accepting of them and they work with him on them. I think that makes him more endearing and more real. I think one of my favorite things about him is this kind of change up that happens, or this handoff that happens. In the beginning of the show, he gets activated. A character like Kes kind of brings him along and tries to help him
Yeah.
realize his humanity and become a better person and relate to people. And then when Seven of Nine comes onto the ship, the Doctor kind of takes the lessons that he's learned through Kes and through his experiences and tries to relay them to Seven. I love that whole fluid learning experience that kind of moves from one to the other. Doctor and Seven have a lot in common. They both had to learn how to operate.
Yeah.
Just operate as a person and relate to people and do the simple things and to just function as a individual. And the Doctor like grasps that right away and tries his best and makes it kind of his life's work to I think dump as much information from himself into Seven.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really unique bond and friendship there that I love. That's a huge component for me, his relationship with Seven, and where that comes from and how it's able to work and the backstory. A lot of talk about, but when you talk about Voyager and you talk about like the long game, while it's not as serialized as other shows, it has these things that build over time, like B'Elanna and Tom Paris. Just right there with it is like all the stuff with his growth and then how he is able to help Seven as well. That's equally like playing the long game, whether intentionally or not, I don't know, but it works pretty darn well under that microscope. So for him, it's the arc, it's the episodes, it's episodes like I think of like Life Signs when he has his first kind of romantic interest with that Vidian woman. I like that. I like Latent Image where he has to pretty rough stuff. And you hear stories today about doctors having to choose between two patients, which is incredibly grim and incredibly depressing to think about. But Latent Image does that exact thing. The doctor's got to choose which person to save, and it kind of throws him into a feedback loop. They have to purge his memory of that event. He can't deal with having had to make that choice. That's a really powerful episode that I think is uniquely aimed at a character like him that is has flaws and that he has to overcome. It's the arc for me that makes him such a successful character.
I agree with everything you said. I think he's definitely knowledgeable as far as practicing medicine. He's a walking encyclopedia. He's got all this knowledge from all these doctors and all this research. But I think the single reason why he's my number one is probably the arc and the relatability, right? So one of his mottos is what they kind of explore on the show is be greater than the sum of your program, right? I really relate to that, and that's the reason why I'm doing this. I'm not good at talking in front of people. I'm not good in social interactions. Did I say the right thing? Did I, he's really relatable in that regard, in that
Sure.
I think we all should probably strive to be greater than our program. So I think just that regard, I think that's why he's number one. Not just he's a very talented doctor. Obviously, all these characters are, but just that relatability and the character aspect in the arc, really relatable character, and I guess a role model. I guess is what
he is. Yes, he is. I mean, look no further than the EMH if you want to find a character on TV that kind of works every day to not be defined by limitations and by challenges and personality quirks that they're aware of, and like that is him. Like you said, I mean, in a nutshell, he refuses to be limited. He wants to continue to grow and not be hamstrung by, in his case, like program limitations. Like he's always trying to like burst at the seams with what his program can kind of handle. But that's a stand-in for everyday people's similar struggles.
Mhm.
You know, like everybody's got their things they're afraid of, or that they're uniquely, you know, not inherently skilled at. But very often in life, you have to deal with those things. And,
Yeah.
you know, he is a role model for those kinds of, you know, challenges that we all face.
Mhm.
So I think that's why he's such a great character. I think if I was gonna pick, you know, like we've kind of done favorite characters in Star Trek history, I'm pretty sure if you go back to like 3 of Trek Live, we did that, and I may have picked the Doctor in my top 5, and I might not have even picked McCoy. So it goes to show that this
But that
is
was
fluid,
characters,
and it will
though. This
change.
we're talking about doctors.
Right. We're talking about
Which I
doctors
think,
specifically.
at least today, we've kind of walked that line of: are we talking about characters or we're talking about doctors? So
Like doctor skill
Yeah.
sets, and I mean,
Yeah.
the fun of this is that the conversations are constantly, you know,
Changing.
You can look at them through all 100,000 different lenses, and we're talking 3 years ago now or whatever for that kind of conversations. That was a long time ago at this point, and opinions shift and change naturally over time.
Yeah.
Today, right now, I put McCoy at 1, but you know, you may have, through your, you know, what you just said about the Doctor, you may have just convinced me. Like if I had to put a pen to paper right now, I might put EMH the
Yeah.
Doctor at 1. It's that close and it's that fluid.
Mhm.
But I do think I feel the one thing I do feel strongly about, I feel like, is a definite comfort thing to say. Like I could definitely state this, is that the Doctor and McCoy are my 2 favorites. They're in a tier above the others, who are also really good characters in their own right and have assets and bring their own things to those shows. But I think those 2 characters are such heavyweights and bring such unique flavors to their shows and are critical to their shows that they're, for my money, they're the 2 that my head goes right to when I think about it.
Yep.
What about, real quick, some of the characters we didn't? Pulaski.
Pulaski was tough just because I think she's an interesting character that we've talked about before, but I think she's very qualified, right? She, Picard has to have heart surgery, and the only one in the quadrant, guess who? Pulaski. So she's definitely very qualified. I think she fits the bill in that regard. I think if we talked about this ad nauseum, so maybe I just quote the episode that we did on her, but yeah.
And like I said when Rob was on with Dr. Pulaski, I like Dr. Pulaski. I'm not by any means.
Nope.
There are things about her that I think are really good, and there are things about her that I might even prefer Crusher on some levels. But small sample size, limited growth. She does have an arc in her relationship with Data.
Does.
She grows in one season.
She does.
And changes her views on that character. But yeah, just off the list for me, Dr. Culber from Discovery. I think similarly, there's a small sample size there.
Yeah.
When I think of Dr. Culber, there's obviously the groundbreaking nature of his relationship with Lieutenant Stamets. That's a big first in Trek. I think that relationship is well presented. And when I think of Dr. Culber, I think, you know, he has a definite unique struggle, having died and kind of come back through the very crazy means.
But I don't think his character's
resurrection.
his character's done right. I know that they probably hopefully come back to that kind of, because that's a big thing, and I think it's
a big thing.
A big thing in season 2.
It is. It's a big thing in season 2, and I think we'll get more of it moving forward. And I think that's part of the challenge with Dr. Culber is, unlike these other characters who have kind of a beginning, middle, and an end, we only have a very small sliver of where Dr. Culber may end up. But I think of my favorite episode of Discovery is If Memory Serves, and that's, when you think of that, when I think of that one, it's easy to jump to. They're on Talos 4 and the Talosians and Captain Pike and Vina. The rift between Spock and Burnham. But the other big component of that episode is Culber kind of really struggling to come to terms with his return and not feeling at home with Stamets, and not feeling, you know, not embracing the let's return to normal you know, aspect of the recovery. Like, he doesn't want to just sit at home with Stamets and eat the same dinners that he had. have the same routines.
Mm-hmm.
He knows he's different and is trying to come to terms with what this all means, and he has this existential struggle going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some really good scenes, and there's a really great shot of him in a turbo lift by himself, and it's like this overhead shot that has the turbo lift, like it really feels like it's claustrophobic. It's like collapsing in on him. It's a really good shot that tells the whole story about how Culber's feeling. So I think he's a really strong character. I love Wilson. I like where we're going with him, and I'm curious to see more. But he's not on this list just out of, incompleteness. I guess.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think we covered all the characters. I mean, we didn't say everything there is to say. I mean, we could do a whole episode on any of these characters, I think, and go deeper and more hardcore into, their arcs and episodes and moments. But this is longer than some of our more recent episodes, so I think that goes to show that we I think, right, that we covered some ground here. Talked a lot about each one of these characters.
Yep, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. You guys know the drill. The discussion does not stop here. Stay tuned to the Twitter sphere and the Discord server. Just for scheduling stuff, when Course Heading is gonna be back, and then also obviously next week we're gonna be back with Trek Live with another fun topic to keep the discussion going. I think we're going to skip the Star Trek content for this week, except mention Rob's First Contact stuff. Definitely check that out. Should be a fun time. So,
agreed.
That being said, wrap it up. Always a fun time talking about each other's rankings. If you guys have any ideas of what you guys would want to see and have us guess each other's rankings, definitely comments section or Twitter, probably the best.
Agreed.
Yep. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.